Hello, everyone. My name is Shalom Fishbane, and I have the schus to be the Kosher administrator here at the cRc. And today we're welcoming you to the cRc Kosher Consumer Pre-Pesach webinar. And of course, we will have our first speaker, our Rav Bezin, Rabbi Yona Reiss Shlita. But I wanted to take one moment before we start with Rabbi Reiss and to say that this is in memory of Mrs. Bernie Cohen, Bernie Tova Bas Ephraim Mordechai Cohen, who we at the cRc miss terribly, like many people out there, especially this time of year. Pesach was when we leaned on Bernie the most. And all of us come to work every day with the hope that we'll make people's day better. And we hope that we reach people and we help them grow in ruchnius. And our method of helping people grow in ruchnius is through taking away what's called tzimtzum halev, and to increase kedusha by having only the top-notch kosher in our systems and our bodies, and that's how we increase kedusha. And everybody plays their part. And everybody, I must say, plays their part very well at the cRc. We're very proud. But I honestly can say there was no one individual that spread so much kedusha in this world through Meichlos to Reiss like Berenit did. She not only was the person that answered all the questions would come from all over the world. She was the front line, and she did it so well and so effectively. But people walked away from the conversation with Berenit feeling good, feeling not only answered, but just feeling good, that they want to continue, and they continue to contact us. But then when she wasn't necessarily answering on, we'll call it cRc's time, but off time, offline, all the various WhatsApp groups, honestly, we're finding out more and more now how much she did. And it's impossible to replace. That's the truth. And it's so apropos that we dedicate this webinar today when we're talking about what's new in Kashrut and what's new in Pesach, specifically to Berenit and her neshama, and that this is really when, as I said earlier, we miss her the most, but also we know that in Shemayim, her neshama is smiling, and her entire family should take solace and nechama in the fact how she really, really, really touched so many people. And as I said earlier, we just are learning more and more as we try to dig into and maybe cover of half of what she did. We're just overwhelmed, both with the awesomeness of what she covered and absolute gratitude to what she brought to the cRc, to the consumer in general, and to Klal Yisrael. So without further ado, it's our great schus to hear from our Rav Bezdin, and then there's going to be two other speakers, including myself, on more specifics, Rabbi Yona Reiss Shlita.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Rabbi Fishbane. It's an honor to address all of you today on behalf of the Chicago Rabbinical Council, and also to honor the memory, as Rabbi Fishbane mentioned, of Biranit Cohen, Zichrono Livracha. So I wanted to touch just upon a few of the topics that are relevant in people's minds, relevant really for all years, but also specifically for this year. Many people go away for Pesach. And then there's a question, if they're going away for Pesach, how do they perform their B'dikas Chometz? There's a general rule recorded in the Shulchan Aruch that if people go away from their homes more than 30 days before Pesach, so then they don't have an obligation of B'dikas Chometz in that home. They obviously have to nullify all of their Chometz, sell whatever chametz they're planning to buy back after Pesach. Supposed to be when it's done on the 14th night, which is the proper time for bedikas chametz or le'aba'asa. It's supposed to be nighttime. That's when you can see into the crevices with your match, with your candle, or with your flashlight the best. So it should also be in the evening. It's not made with a bracha, because the bracha is only when it is going to be the beginning of the destruction of the chametz that takes place the next day. So it's all kind of one process of the destruction of the chametz, but one is not burning and destroying the chametz when one is leaving their home a couple of weeks before Pesach. But what if a person is going to be selling the home or leasing their home entirely to the non-Jewish purchaser of the chametz? Is there an obligation for bedika? A person's going on a hotel program, and they're going to be leaving the morning of Pesach, but that morning they're going to sell their house, or they're going to lease their house to the non-Jew. Do they have to do the bedika the previous night? So the Mishnah Berurah quotes a couple of dissenting views regarding this opinion, and essentially the recommended approach is to do one of two things. Either if a person wanted to be exempted from bedikas chametz under those circumstances, they could do an early sale. We know that there's an early sale. It's done for people who, for example, are going to be in Eretz Yisrael. So by the morning of Erev Pesach, it's already too late for them to sell their chametz. So they sell the chametz the previous day, on the 13th day of Nisan. However, even if people are just going to go to another state, they'll go to Florida, they'll go to Arizona, or something like that for their Pesach vacation, and really they could have done the bedika on the night of the 14th, and they could have done their mechiva on the morning of the 14th. Nonetheless, if they would do the mechiras chametz, they would sell the chametz and lease out their entire house and not come back to it over the course of the entire Pesach. So then the Mishnah Berurah says that they're exempt from doing bedika before they would leave their home. They still have a mitzvah, bedikas chametz, wherever they're going to be. They should take some chametz with them to their hotel room and put out the crumbs in the hotel room and check it out on the 14th night of Nisan, so that they could do a proper bedika then. But that would be a source for an exemption under those circumstances. If, however, they're not going to be leaving their home, let's say, on the 13th, they're going to be there on the 14th night of Pesach, and the mechiva will only be taking place on the morning of the next day. They are not giving the non-Jew permission to enter into the premises because they're still there on the night of the 14th. So then they should really do the bedika, even though they are not going to be present for Pesach, and they'll be selling or leasing their entire home. However, they have the option. The Mishnah Berurah concludes, and this is the eighth of the Chassam Sofen, Rav Moshe Feinstein, also had this suggestion as well, that they set aside one particular room where they're not selling the entire room to the non-Jew, and that's the room in which they should do the bedika, and all the other rooms that they're going to be selling or leasing to the non-Jew on the morning of the 14th day of Pesach, of Erev Pesach. So all of that, they would be exempt from having to do a bedika. In this way, they could limit their bedika just to their kitchen, their dining room, or whatever rooms they're going to set aside for that purpose. So that would be an eitzah for people who are going away and don't want to do the full extensive bedika. Either they sell the chametz on the 13th day in the morning, or if they're going to sell on the 14th day of the morning, they set aside a specific room or one or two rooms in which they're going to fulfill the mitzvah bedika the previous night. If you have students who are leaving the yeshiva and they're coming home a couple of weeks before Pesach, so when do they do their bedika? So again, it's the same story. Most of the poskim would say they should do the bedika before they leave in their rooms, their apartments, wherever they are, but they should do it again like a real bedika. In the evening is when it's being done. It should be done with a flashlight, just not with a bracha. It's important to be aware of that, because this is already becoming halacha l'maisa as we get closer to Chodesh Nisan, and you have Talmidim coming home from their various yeshivas. So this is important, since it's within the 30 days, there would be a chiyuv bedika, according to most authorities. They have some sort of a baila, some ownership interest. There's a question about that with students in a yeshiva, but it's generally assumed that there's some sort of an interest that they have, and it would be appropriate for them to do a bedika. So chumrah that some observe, popular chumrah, that even for those, it's the common practice now to sell chametz. Even if a person thinks that they've gotten rid of all of their chametz, it's a good idea to sell anyway, because who knows, maybe you have something you didn't remember, and you say you're going to sell whatever chametz didn't end up being destroyed, being burned, and so forth. It's still in your premises that you didn't find. It's a good idea. Get rid of chametz three different ways. We nullify the chametz, we burn chametz, and we also sell chametz. These are all different ways of fulfilling the idea of tashbisu, of getting rid of one's chametz. But there is a minhag that some have of not selling chametz gomer. If it's a complete 100% immaculate chametz that is pristine, that's not mixed together with other ingredients. So based on a comment of the Bechor Shur, who says that really the whole selling of chametz is a bit of a harama, a bit of an artifice. Therefore, we should only do it for things that are chametz d'Rabbanan, not things that are chametz gomer per se. So we got approached at the cRc. They wanted a definitive list regarding what's considered to be chametz gomer. I was approached about it. I said we have other things to do. Our general shita is that if you have the minhag, good to go try to observe it to the best of your ability. But to the extent that we do allow mechiras chametz, as Rav Moshe Feinstein said, the whole institution of mechiras chametz discussed in the Tosefta and so forth is talking about chametz gomer. That's why you're getting rid of your chametz. But what would typically fall within those categories, it would be breakfast cereals like Cheerios, obviously, bread, pastries, and the like. Would be your traditional categories of chametz gomer. When I sell the chametz for many of the residents here in Chicago and many of our companies and the like, we sell everything. But in addition to the selling, of course, there's also the biur chametz, and there's also the bittul chametz. Now, one of the things that has changed this year in terms of anyone out there, I know we have many listeners, some maybe Rabbanim who deal with the question of selling chametz for their shuls. It's important to know that there is a practice of seeing to it that when you lease out the premises of all of the sellers of the chametz, that you lease out each one of the premises for at least a pruta. It should be some object of value. When you give the down payment, obviously it's going to be a lot more than a pruta as well. Some have the practice that for every single seller, the down payment of the non-Jew should correspond to at least one pruta's worth for every single seller. Understand the price of a pruta is dependent upon the price of silver. And the price of silver this year has absolutely skyrocketed. So whatever was in your contracts in previous years that you thought a pruta was 2 cents, was 3 cents, understand that you're going to have to at least double that amount for this year. When I checked the other day, it was a shekel, which is about 19.6 grams. We usually round it to 20 grams of silver, was about selling for about $54. There are 768 prutos in a shekel. So right now, the price of a pruta is approximately 7 cents. And with the fluctuation in silver prices, a good chance it could go over 7 cents. I would recommend right now, based on the pricing, to put at least 8 cents as a pruta with respect to your mechiras chametz contracts. And that's what we're doing here in the cRc. So that's an important change. Specifically for this year. It's a good season for Kohanim doing Pidyon Haben, and for women who want to collect their ksuva. It's worked out on many fronts, but understand the ramifications with respect to mechiras chametz. There's a Rav asked me just yesterday about why is it that the cRc so machmir that we tell people as a chumrah, we say as a stringency, it's a good idea to buy all of your dairy products before Pesach. That you should buy your eggs, you should buy your milk before Pesach. So he said when he grew up in the Bronx, so they only had these teeny tiny little refrigerators that in those days I think they called ice boxes, and they couldn't fit eggs for a few days. You'd buy the eggs the day that you needed the eggs. So he said all these chashiv rabbanim were buying eggs during Pesach. So why is it that suddenly are we saying that these chashiv rabbanim were doing the wrong thing? So I said, well, it's not really casting aspersions. It's just a reality of the food industry. You need to understand there was a chumrah that always existed with respect to buying dairy before Pesach because of the concern that if you had a cow that was giving milk, or a chicken that's laying eggs, so maybe they're eating chumetz, and maybe some of the chumetz that they're eating is going into their system. And you had different shitos who said, well, there was a Pri Megadim who said that if they didn't eat chumetz for 24 hours before the cow gave forth the milk, or the chicken laid the eggs, so then it would be okay. And others who said, it's always okay as long as they ate other foods that were not chumetz, and the non-chumetz got mixed together with the chumetz, so therefore what's being produced is not really considered to be chumetz, so that's okay. But others, this was all based on the assumption that the chumetz was being digested during Pesach itself, and you didn't have any bittul that would take place if the product was produced before Pesach. So it was recommended even then that you get the milk and the eggs before Pesach. But even if you consider that to be a big chumrah, that you're worried about what the cow digested during Pesach itself, if the milk is being milked on Pesach itself, you need to understand that nowadays, even in the manufacturing process, you have other concerns, which is that there are additives that are sometimes injected in the milk. You have vitamins. You can have vitamin D that could be derived from wheat sources. So again, if you had the milk prior to Pesach, so any type of additive that had a chometz derivative in it would become batul. You don't have to worry about it. It's lak balak. It's not going to be resuscitated on Pesach. But if it's going to be Pesach itself, so it's important to understand Pesach this is why we talk about chumrah de chometz. The stringency of chometz is not only because a person could be chayav kares chas v'shalom for eating chometz, but because it's not batul. Even the slightest amount of chometz is not batul, is not nullified. And therefore, because of that tremendous reality, you have to worry that if there was milk that was produced, milk that even you're buying on Pesach itself, and they added something to it, so it didn't become batul before Pesach, and that's the reason why maybe if you find milk that says kosher lePesach on it, would be okay. But otherwise, that's the reason for the stringency. The same thing applies even to eggs. Even to eggs, they sometimes sprinkle on some preservative, which could be chometz derived. It's maybe a far-fetched chash, but it's a chash. And that's the reason that we say, independent of the old-time concern of what the animal would ingest, or a chicken would ingest during Pesach itself, it's laying eggs, there's also this concern regarding anything that's added to the eggs that could be of a chometz nature that, of course, would be batul. If it would be before Pesach, but if it's on Pesach, so then it's not going to be batul. This is the reason as well that we tell people that even a product that seems as innocuous as water, you should ideally buy before Pesach. You buy it, so it's going to be batul at that time. But if you're going to buy it on Pesach, so you have to be careful that it doesn't have vitamins added to it, because the vitamins could have a source from chumetz, and then you don't have bittul. And the same thing with respect to calcium citrate. If you have calcium citrate, that also has a chometz derivation, and therefore, even something as innocuous as water, if you bought it before Pesach, no problem. The calcium citrate was batul. You buy it on Pesach, so then you have a potential problem on your hands. So that's why we make these recommendations, even though it seems like it's far-fetched, but it all has a very strong and firm basis. Just the last thing I'll mention is that there's now a whole big resurgence of products that are grown hydroponically. And there's a question as to whether you're allowed to use hydroponically grown romaine lettuce, for example, for your maror. It has the advantage that it's easier to check for bugs. So I would tell you, just buy romaine lettuce that is cRc certified, where we had good mashgichim who checked them very carefully for bugs. So you don't have to worry about that. If you end up with a hydroponic lettuce, so there's a separate shiloh, which is what bracha do you make on them, because there's a machlokas haposkim whether you make a berei pri hadama on hydroponically grown lettuce, which is the shita of the Shevet HaLevi, shita of the Chuvas or Hagos, or do we say that since it is not connected to the ground, you'd make a shahakol? The Chayyim certainly held that way. Ravayu Yosef paskin that way as well. Our own Abezdin who preceded me Rav Gedayu Dov Shishwart says Eichet Tzadik Levacha also paskin if it's grown hydroponically, so you make a shahakol. That doesn't per se disqualify the item from being used as a maror, but then if you wanted to have the bracha that you made on the karpas count for the maror, because there's a question as to whether you need to make, besides the alachilas maror, you need to make a birchas hanenin on the maror, but the matzah doesn't necessarily cover it because the maror is not a regular part of the meal, it's just something we're introducing because in the mitzvah, who else would in the right mind would be eating maror? So therefore, you want the kappas to cover it, but if the kappas is some celery that you're eating, and that's a regular berei pri adama, so it's no longer going to cover the hydroponically grown romaine lettuce. So some, I saw one kashrut agency recommended that for that reason alone, you shouldn't use hydroponics, but it could be that maybe even hydroponics is not the actual maror. You'll say we have a proof. The Gemara talks about how you could even grow the wheat for the matzah in a flower pot that doesn't have a hole in it, and nonetheless it could still count as matzah, and the maror is compared to the matzah, so therefore we see that the maror also doesn't have to be directly on the ground. It doesn't necessarily mean for sure that hydroponically it's going to be the same deal. Maybe hydroponically grown produce is so far removed. It's just like we could differentiate between the bracha, according to Rav Ovadia Yosef, that you'd make on something grown in a flower pot without a hole and something grown hydroponically, that the first would be a berei pri adam and the other would be a shahakoni abidroro. You could potentially differentiate in this fashion as well. So my own personal recommendation would be avoid the hydroponics with respect to the mitzvah of maror. It's what my Rebbe, Rav Mordechai Willig Shlita, recommends as well. So I'll just conclude with that thought, and I think I've exceeded my time. So I'll leave the other insights to my very esteemed colleagues to continue. Everybody should have a Chag Kosher v'Sameach. And we should only hear B'Soros Tovos along the lines of B'Nisan Nigalo, B'Nisan Asidan Ligayo, that we will redeem the Nisan and we should experience this Nisan, the Geula Shlema B'Mheira V'Yameinu.
Sure, no problem. Okay. Excuse me. I'm Dovid Cohen. I work here at the cRc. I'm going to I was asked to talk about two different things. The first is some older differences of opinion that cRc and others have about two Pesach items, and then afterwards some sort of new items that came up. The first is that we differentiate. Some people take different positions on is what the status is of seltzer that's made for Pesach. Seltzer is carbon dioxide. It can come from different places. Many of them are completely innocuous, but they can also be a byproduct of making beer and whiskey and etc. Question in Poskim, starting about give or take 100 years ago, about when they first started developing seltzer, whether one should be concerned about chametz that comes from seltzer, seltzer that comes from chametz sources. Earlier Poskim were more concerned, later Poskim were not as much concerned, and different hashkachas take different positions. So the cRc's position is we would not recommend that carbon dioxide unless it was made from a source that was not chametzdik. And other hashkachas take different positions. Some of them say it shouldn't come from chametz, but it's okay if it comes from kidneys. Others will say it's okay from every source because there's halachic basis to think that the isser of the chametz doesn't transfer into the seltzer. And everyone takes different positions. Again, our position is that you need to have it with hashkacha, which is the hashkacha will verify that in fact it was made not from chametz. Okay, and another questionable item, again, where people take different positions on. In fact, the cRc itself takes different positions on, are things that are potentially considered not edible that you put into your mouth. That is, the three examples of that are toothpaste and mouthwash and lipstick. Those are all items that they're sort of on the border of what people consider edible or not edible. If it would be not edible, then it would be okay to use them on Pesach or if they're treif. So there are different shittas about that. And year-round, the cRc's position is that those things do not need hashkacha. Even if they come with non-kosher ingredients, we consider them to be not edible, and we allow them, all three of those. But for Pesach, we take a stricter position, and we tell people they should only use them if they know that, that they're free of chametz, that there's no concerns. And therefore, whereas other things that are not edible, that are more obviously not edible, or don't go into your mouth, we tell people are completely okay. For these ones, we tell people they should only use them if we know them to be free of chametz. And so for toothpaste and mouthwash, pretty much you have to find someone who will be able to verify that an item has no chametz in it. Some of them come with hashgacha for Pesach. Some other ways of verifying that there's no chametz in them. And for lipstick, for the past year or two, we've had something for lipsticks and things that you put into your eyes, also eye drops that also potentially could have chametz in them. And we may even soon have for pet foods, which is you can put your ingredients in there's a place on our website, you can just plop in all the ingredients and it'll tell you whether those is or is not a concern for Pesach. Again, for lipsticks, it exists right now, and for the eye care items, and maybe even in time for Pesach this year, maybe for next year, to be able to do for your pet foods also. Pet foods is a little bit of a different question. Pet foods could be chametz, they could also be basa b'chalav. So we have this way to check it out to find out whether those are okay for Pesach. Okay, so those are two items that are sort of differences of opinion. Now I'm just going to mention a few things that have come up or that are a little different for this year or in general that are different. And the first is we tell people that if they have mouse traps around their house, they need to ensure that they're not chametzik. And people have asked, like, that sounds so strange. It kills mice. So why would I be worried that this is an edible item that I should worry about that this thing is chametzik? So it turns out that there's different types of mouse traps, as you could guess. So the simplest ones are like what they call glue traps. Those are fine. There's no questions to those. But other traps that use a bait to get the mouse to come in, the mouse then eats this bait and then it dies from it. So it turns out that it used to be that that bait was poisonous, as you could imagine, right? It's meant to kill the mouse, so it's poisonous. But what happened is people were worried because pets would eat from it, little kids would eat from it, and it's sitting around the house. It's supposed to catch the mouse. It could also catch your cat. So they came up with this great idea. They figured out that if you put in vitamin D into these pellets, there's different kinds of bait that you have. The vitamin D is not good for the mice, and it'll kill the mice. And actually, it has an advantage because it doesn't kill the mice right away. It kills them after a couple of days, meaning away from the trap, back in their hole, wherever they came from. You don't have to deal with having a dead mouse left behind your fridge. So putting in the vitamin D took care of the mice, and it was perfect. It was harmless for people and pets, etc. So if you look at the ingredients for some of these, which we did, at some of these items that are used for mouse traps and pellets that put out to keep mice away, they're completely edible foods. I mean, you look at them, including in many of them wheat. They're just flour. It's just a nice piece of food which would attract the mouse to come eat from it. But in fact, it's and for the mouse, it'll kill the mouse, but it's totally harmless to people. It's completely edible, and that's a reason why we tell people they should think about what's in their mousetrap. Find out what's in that, what is the bait is, and then from that you'll be able to know whether you could keep it or you can't keep it on Pesach. Again, because it might be just completely edible chametz. Okay. Another thing is people have it's more of a work thing or like a shul thing. They'll have a water coolers that not as common in the houses. People have that in their houses as well, which has this jug of water that holds water into it. And then from that you can get hot or cold water out of it. For a long time, we've told people that if it holds cold water, if it's just cold water, they should just clean it well, and they could continue to use it. It's nice that you get a new jug. We'll talk about the jug in a second. And if it has hot water, we told them that a method of how to kasher them. So two things related to that. One is that people brought up a question, which is those jugs that hold the water in them. We hear rumors that college students or people who think they're still college students use them for beer. They refill them with beer, or they make their own beer inside of them. So we looked into it. It's a little bit of a halacha question. So in which case, if I have water in there on Pesach, so let me explain. After you use the water, the people take it back jug. They take it back to the company. They rinse it out and they put new water and send it to the next guy. So how do I know that I'm not getting one that had been used for beer last week or yesterday? So I'll give it just for a second. I'll talk about it, and that is the way you would kasher had it been used to hold beer is something called milu v'irui. You would fill it up with water, let it sit there for 24 hours, empty it out, and again do it again 3 times. You do that each one for 24 hours. So that means to say is that if the person who used it for beer used it more than 3 times ago, it had Milah V'irui. That's exactly what they do. When they get the water back to the water company, they rinse it out, they fill it up with water, and it sits there for more than 24 hours. So had it been more than three people ago, it's been kashered already. So the only possibility is maybe it's the person right before me, within the last 3 people, maybe he was the one who used it in this way with beer. So then there's another angle, which is if you figure out how much plastic there is in there, any amount of chametz that would have been absorbed into the jug would have been bottled into the water. Now, chametz on Pesach is asur b'mashu. Chametz, if it would come out on Pesach, it would be asur b'mashu. But being as it's only a suffix, it's really far-fetched. Within the last 3 people, somebody used it, that's only a suffix, so a suffix asur b'mashu would not be an issue. Okay, but that's an older position of ours, and you could use those water bottles. It's a nice thing to get a new one. But now, for most water coolers, we have a method you look on our website, a way of koshering that. But that method of koshering uses water. You can imagine you use boiling water on it. So there's a new device. It's called I don't know if I pronounce this correctly, Noam. It's a machine. Doesn't have the water jug behind it. It connects to the water pipes in your house, and it produces hot and cold water. And has this nice feature that for Shabbos it turns itself off. It turns off the feature of allowing you new water on Shabbos. So you could use it on Shabbos because it basically just holds hot water for Shabbos. And it does it automatically. And so from person might want to have this device. And for that, our methods of koshering are not going to be effective because it involves pouring boiling water in places. And this machine is too delicate for someone to pour boiling water on top of it. So we don't recommend people kosher them. Okay, 2 more things. One is that we've long told people that cleansers are okay for Pesach, like things that you clean your counters with v'cheina. That's because they're not edible. Those are not edible items. It's become more popular that cleansers, instead of just being made from the soap-type materials that we used to, are made partially or completely made from vinegar. Okay, there's one that's basically just a bottle of vinegar. That's all they're selling you. And the potential is that it could be the vinegar is chametz. Not as likely in the United States, but it's possible that it's chametz. And it could be that it's edible. Again, it depends on the formulation. So just something to think about, that some of those cleansers, we've modified our wording a little bit, because some of those cleansers are in fact are more sensitive than they used to be. The traditional cleansers are all, we believe, are not edible, but these are a little not as clear. It's worth thinking about. Okay. And one last thing, and that is, I believe we may have already told this to people last year. If I don't remember exactly, and that is, as Ashkenazim, we don't kasher glass, and we consider glass to absorb taste and not to be able to be kashered. Sfaradim, on the other hand, take the position of the Mechaber that glass doesn't absorb, and so they don't work. They can use the same glass for milchiks and for fleishiks, or for Pesach and for year round. Okay, not all Sfaradim, but many Sfaradim will follow that position, and they use that. Okay, and one of the popular glass items that people use is Corel dishes, because Corel is made out of glass. So you could use it, then they would use it for milchiks, fleishiks, or Pesach and year round. So in fact, Rabbi Raka, who's dying here in the Bezdin, he's the local Sephardic Rav in town, brought up the point that although the plate in fact is made of glass, that's the truth. It's made of glass. But the plates always have decorations on them. Okay? They all have decorations on them. Okay, those decorations are on top of the glass. Okay, and this I don't know how to describe the colors: the blue and green and yellow. Okay, those decorations are on top of the glass. They're not in the glass. They're on top. You could feel it yourself when you go there. And when we poked around to learn about what they're made out of, they're not made out of glass. So while it's true that someone who's Sephardi could use glass for milchiks and fleishiks and Pesach and year round, that would not be true for Corel, because in fact the Corel is not just glass; it has other things to it also. So all the rest of it would be balea. So if I use it for milchiks, I can't use it for fleishiks, or kosher and treif, or chametz and year round. He shouldn't be using it.
Thank you, Rabbi Cohen. That was my sound check. Good. So Rabbi Cohen covered a lot of the new questions that came in this year. I have a few also that I jotted down. But I wanted to really share is that we at the cRc do a lot of research on Pesach, and every year we try to come up with ideas of how to share this information with consumers. As I said earlier, we dedicated this webinar, L'Zecher Nishmas Beroni Tova Bas Ephraim Mordechai Cohen, who was the mouthpiece and was the one that disseminated all the information. I must tell you, was just knowing Beronit. It's sometimes when people think that in order for them not to speak bad or speak Lashon Hara, the best thing is just not to speak, right? Beronit was the example of someone that was the ultimate communicator. She spoke a lot, but yet she was so makbid on Lashon Hara. And I remember when we once sat down, we were talking. This is before she met her wonderful husband, Jonathan. And we were going through the various things that she was looking for in a husband. And, this thing about talking to someone that's makbid Lashon Hara is very important to me. So it's apropos when we talk about communicative that it's Zecher Nishmas Beronit. So we at the cRc try to find ways to communicate all this information, and we can be here for hours and hours just going through what happened the last week on Pesach. So I want to share with you some of those ways. So if we finish today's webinar and we didn't cover the specific thing that you have in your kitchen, don't worry. First of all, we have something called Ask cRc, which during the year is a fantastic, you just type in what you're looking for, press search, and boom, it most probably will be there, and we'll tell you what we've done already, and it's all in there. In addition, this season, we added a Pesach button. And so specifically, if you just want to know about Pesach, it's right in there. And there's the lipstick thing that Rabbi Cohen mentioned, and there's other ways of research. So askcrc.org should be the number one. Our app is amazing. We're very proud of our app. And anytime we talk about app, I have to talk about this logo scanner, and a big kudos to Rabbi Niehaus, who was the brains behind this. And it's just an amazing thing where you can just go over to any hechsher that you don't recognize and put it next to, we'll scan it, it will tell you who's giving the hechsher and what the cRc's opinion of it. This year, we did something new. We put out these award-winning videos. Award-winning goes to my granddaughter, who's the actress. That's the award part. But it's amazing. These short little videos, about a minute apiece, very informative, very fun to watch. We're just finished our first week. We're putting about 5 a week, 15 altogether. You can find them on our website, and all based on the comments that are coming back to us. Just great. Rabbi Reiss's point about the eggs on Pesach, that caused somewhat of a stir. Like, what? I can't buy fresh eggs on that. We're still dealing with, my house is pelted with eggs, but that's another story. All right. And also, we're doing a great job with our Pesach guide. Every year we perfected better. We went to a different model. We did more of like a shopping guide where you can stick it and go shopping with it. And if you haven't been able to get it yet, it actually was put into this week's Mishpacha magazine. That if you're not able to get our here in Chicago, whatever it is, you can go buy the Mishpacha magazine, and it's being put in every single one being sold this week. We're also, by the way, we're deep into post-Pesach. We have a meeting this afternoon to figure out how, the soon as Pesach's over, we can't start meeting about, okay, where can people shop? We have to meet now. We have to work it through. We're working on various mechiras and all of that. And Rabbi Reiss's point about the pruta is it's a great insight that Rabbi Reiss had to share with the other people that do mechiras chametz. So these are the various things we're working on and ways to communicate. And of course, always call our office. But this is really the way. So a few of the things, Rabbi Cohen touched a lot of them that come up every year. One of the most common questions are the Costco Kirkland almond flour. And yes, we've researched it, and Baruch Hashem, it's acceptable again for this year. And, we can enjoy that. Another question that came in, someone is preparing now for cooking for Pesach, and they have what's called a vacuum sealer, right? Where you put the food in, you vacuum it. This is something they use all year. Can I use the same vacuum sealer as I do for the rest of the year for Pesach? So the answer is you have to clean it well. Don't use it for 24 hours. Then turn it on so that the sealing element gets hot, and after that, you could use it. So that's something new. I have to tell you, just as I mentioned earlier about communication, sometimes we get questions where the conversation goes, can I use X, Y, and Z? You shouldn't be using that. No, I didn't ask you if I should. I just want to know if I'm going to use it anyway. For example, there's tobacco items we get. The number one question every year recently are e-cigarettes, Zyn, all these things that personally I know very little about, but we had to do our research. And this is a question. Do we tell people, sorry, e-cigs are dangerous to you, stay away? Or do we do the research? And that's why we have this supposed to have Rabbi Reiss that guides us on these things. I will tell you, I partook this morning in a conference call with other hashkachas about various things, and there's one hashkach on there that actually certifies e-cigs. That's their opinion. I mean, it's not our opinion. We wouldn't do such a thing. And I asked him, by the way, for Pesach, he says, no way, and he explained why and how and what goes into the making the juice and all that. So this is just part of, it's not just about the ingredients, it's also maybe all the hashkafa part. Should we be getting involved in answering these type of things? A question came in this morning. Someone picked up they went shopping, they bought the Mishpacha magazine, and they picked out the cRc guide and reading it out loud. And then the wife was reading aloud. This fellow hears a shriek because she just read in our guide that anise is kitnius, and she just had made her whole Pesach, I think, a soup with do I pronounce that right? Anise? And what do you mean? What do you mean it's kitnius? First of all, they saw in another Pesach guide from another agency that it's not kitnius. So he called and all of that. So the truth is that it's a machlokes. The Ramah brings out its mother, and the Mishabura Paskins l'chumra, and we're not going to give a shir on halacha right now. But it turned out that with the help of Rabbi Cohen, we got into the recipes. That's what we do at the cRc. We not only answer questions, tell us how you made it, how exactly it looked, and it turned out the good news was that she had used the plants part of it, right? And what's called the leaves or the tendrils, and not the actual seed. And that is a question that we've asked many times before. Rabbi Schwartz had Paskin back then, and Rabbi Reiss agrees as well, that if it's just going to be the leaves of these, whether it's fennel, dill, anise, peas, and these type of things, and not the pods and not the tips, which have the seeds, then it's okay to go. So it's good to know, and Baruch Hashem, they're going to enjoy that on Pesach. A couple of all those small things, and that is a very common question is brown sugar. Now, pure brown sugar is simply less refined white sugar. That's really what it is. So if they would stop refining it a little earlier, you'd have brown sugar, and that is fine, just like white sugar is. So a purist might say brown sugar should be fine for Pesach, but again, like Rabbi said earlier, everything changes because of the industry changes. You can't say what happened then, and that's why we review every single thing again. What happened this year? Things happen, whether it's the economy changed or world politics actually make changes in the way they have to substitute things, they can't get things. This happens every single year, and therefore we review it again. So because brown sugar is something that today is really mostly white sugar blended with molasses or caramel color, so therefore it does need a hashkacha. Another example of that might be on tequilas. Tequila used to be somewhat of a pure product of agave, and tequila that would be okay for Pesach. Well, that changed when tequila became very popular, especially during COVID. They couldn't keep up with it, so all sorts of funny things were going into it, and therefore, although this year I'm happy to say, based on the research Rabbi Nias has done, that we're able to approve some more tequilas and specific brands all being found online. But please note that a tequila could have all sorts of funny things. As a matter of fact, last week there was a big WhatsApp tumult about some sort of popular tequila from Costco and Kirkland, whatever it was. We Baruch Hashem, we got to the bottom of that. But what we in researching it, we uncovered all sorts of things that go into tequilas that are no longer of the pure thing. Finally, I'll say two other very quick things. One is something I just want to repeat from the Chaf K, which is the Joiva products. They're covered jelly ring. Who could have a Seder without Joiva jelly, right? My 1950s right now, but whatever it is. The marshmallow, so it's very popular amongst kids. So for many years, the Chavke gives the certification all year. And then for Pesach, it kind of pivoted to someone else for kidneys. At this point, the Chavke is saying clearly that they do not endorse, certify, or recommend these products even for Pesach, even for those that use kidneys on Pesach. And I think that's important to know. That's different from previous years. So therefore, for someone that doesn't have a kidneys, they're not worried about kidneys, they should do that. And finally, I would say the other most common question we get is the chosen foods, 100% pure organic avocado oil, and it has the OU, but doesn't have the P on it. Is it fine? And yes, the good news is that even without the P, it is fine, as per the OU, and therefore we're good to go with that. With that, I want to thank everybody for joining us and wish everybody a Chag, Kosher v'Sameach, and of course, when we say kosher here at the cRc, we have all sorts of, we at the cRc, when it comes to Pesach, we celebrate Pesach Sheni because Pesach is so inside joke. But anyway, thank you everyone for listening and Chag Kosher v'Sameach.